Back here on 1010XL and 92.5 FM in the city of Jacksonville, we are glad you are with us. Billy Napier out as the head football coach at the University of Florida. The big question now is what is next for the Florida Gators? Of course, we're probably a good 2 months or so away from getting a final answer on that, but certainly Gator Nation has made their point very clear, at least a majority of Gator Nation, that Lane Kiffin appears to be their number one target. Let's head out to Oxford, Mississippi. Brad Logan is our guy when it comes to the Ole Miss Rebels. He's the host of the Believe in Ole Miss podcast, among many other outlets covering Ole Miss. And Brad is always kind enough to join us here on 1010XL. Brad, how we doing?
Doing well. I appreciate you having me on. And, yeah, it's a topic everywhere. And the people of Ole Miss are rightly worried, as I'm sure the people of Florida are worried as well. We heard from Scott Strickland, as you guys did earlier in the week, and basically was asked who's going to make this hire. And Scott, a Mississippi native, former Mississippi State athletic director, said he is. So we've heard from other dignitaries around that Florida program, Shane Matthews. We heard from Steve Spurrier. And, all eyes are on Lane Kiffin. I think you're absolutely nailed it.
All right, Brad, let's dive right in. The reaction in Oxford on Sunday when Billy Napier was fired, I think Ole Miss fans probably knew at that point that Florida was going to target Lane Kiffin, correct?
Yeah, absolutely zero surprise there, Ryan. You look at what Lane has done at Ole Miss, and it's historical. He's done something in Oxford that hasn't been done since the early 1960s under head coach Johnny Vaught. And yet another 10-win season appear to be on the horizon, depending on what happens the next couple of weeks. But Ole Miss playing pretty good football, with the exception of the defense against Georgia on Saturday. They had Georgia on the ropes, up 2 scores in the third quarter. And, yeah, all eyes kind of turned to Lane Kiffin after the news broke. And everybody was kind of saying that this is going to be the end for Billy Napier, win or lose against Mississippi State. That proved to be true. So I think there are a lot of ways you can look at this thing. It's a very layered answer when you say should or should not Lane Kiffin go to Florida. I think if you look at this Florida team, there are a couple of things, Florida program, there are a couple of things that really jump out at you that you can't argue. It's a larger fan base, bigger alumni, probably more money, more national championships, better facilities. But I'll ask you, Ryan, I mean, I don't know if that plays as much of a factor as it did 5, 6, 7 years ago. Now with the advent of the NIL, a program like Ole Miss that has a collective, a university athletic department, administration, a head coach, and a chancellor that all kind of work together, and a fan base is kind of pulling the same rope with the NIL and with giving and really doing their best for the flagship program in Mississippi. I think that says a lot for Ole Miss, also being the only game in town. There's no professional sports for an entertainment dollar. That plays a little bit into it. So it's definitely going to be interesting to watch over the next I don't know if we're going weeks, Ryan, or we're going days. But I do know this. Ole Miss has to avoid what happened in 2022. Whenever Lane and Auburn begin talking, or their representation, I should say, the program took a dip. We heard from Jaden Williams, the starting right tackle, today in the media press availability, and he made mention that they don't want to have a 22 happen in 25. And Ole Miss has plenty of games ahead of them, beginning with a road trip, a huge one against Oklahoma. This is an Ole Miss team that's in the college football playoff conversation, but they need to win on Saturday. How much does this talk have to do with that? Will we see Lane Kiffin make a decision one way or the other before then? I don't think so. But obviously, if you're an Ole Miss fan, you don't want to have to deal with what you dealt with in 2022. At the end of the day, I don't know what Lane Kiffin's going to do. I could literally see it going either way. But I do think and feel pretty comfortable in saying the money end of it will not be a problem for Ole Miss, regardless of what the money figure is, because I do believe Ole Miss is in a financial position to take care of Lane Kiffin.
A couple of more for Brad Logan. He's our guy out there with the Ole Miss Rebels. He's the host of the Believe in Ole Miss podcast. Brad, has Lane Kiffin in the last 2 or 3 days publicly addressed the Florida situation? Has he said anything about it?
He did, actually, was asked in the local media call on Sunday by one of the beat writers about the speculation about not having a situation like they had in 22 when they lost a number of games, or a couple of games after all of that speculation with Auburn came out. And he basically said, Ryan, because here's the thing. Chuck Rounsaville, the Ole Miss Spirit, immediately reached out to Keith Carter, director of athletics for Ole Miss, and ask him about any particular contract negotiations. And Keith's words were the university is being proactive, which to me tells me the university understands that there's things going on behind the scenes and they want to get a deal signed as quick as they can. Well, in turn, Florida makes a decision. They're going parting ways with Billy Napier. So now all of a sudden, Florida's looking for a head football coach. And we've heard Spurrier. We've heard so many others. Shane Matthews, I mentioned him a moment ago. And I think I saw a video with Shane laying out all of the positives for Florida. I can't dispute that. But I don't know if that's what Lane Kiffin and the representation are really targeting for a reason to come to a program. So, but he did mention it when asked. Lane Kiffin said, I don't talk on things like that. I have a representation that handle that. During the season, we're focused on Oklahoma. I'm very much doing the best I can to kind of put it in the context of what Lane was saying. Those aren't direct quotes, but that's kind of, I'm putting in words what he said. And he didn't comment on it directly, just saying that his representation kind of handles that. And so, he's not going to comment on it. Lane's always been a step ahead, whether it's a transfer portal, NIL, any type of play calling. He's always kind of got a step ahead of the competition. This is no different. He always has everything planned out perfectly, and so he's playing this one very close to the best.
Brad, I tend to agree with you, and I've made this point really for a while now, but it's obviously more prominent today in regards to the whole Lane Kiffin situation. I don't know how much better of a job Florida is than Ole Miss in the land of NIL. Now, if this was, 2005 or even 2015, right, I think that would be a different conversation. But with NIL and the portal, I mean, for crying out loud, Indiana might win the national championship this year. Vanderbilt controls their own destiny in late October to win the Southeastern Conference. I mean, that's where we are in college football now. It is not your grandfather's or your father's or even your older brother's college football. It is a new world, and some of these jobs have narrowed because of NIL and because of the portal. Having said that, the talk about, Lane Kiffin, has he reached a ceiling at Ole Miss? Has he done everything that he can do there, and would he want a challenge at a place like Florida, where he apparently idolized Spurrier growing up in the college ranks? Obviously, his father, Monty Kiffin, down in Tampa Bay. Lane's very familiar with the state. Florida Atlantic speaks for that. His family has some ties to the Gators and Gainesville area. I mean, there are real issues for Ole Miss to look at and wonder, could this be the time Lane would actually leave?
100%, Ryan. I agree with all of that. I think those are all very positive attributes that would have Lane look at Florida very seriously. At the end of the day, I think it comes down to financing, and it comes down to how quick can you win. Lane has shown that you can win at Ole Miss. At a high level, I would argue yes. At the highest level, hasn't got there yet. But I do not think he's reached his ceiling, because you look at last year, Ole Miss was able to beat top-ranked Georgia, but couldn't put things together on the road at Florida, at home against Kentucky, and then on the road at LSU. By the way, led in all those games. Had those games, gone another way, Ole Miss very well could have gotten to that ultimate college football playoff berth to where you could possibly play for a national championship. Those are things I do believe he can do at Oxford. Obviously, he hasn't done that yet. But there's no overshadowing the fact. It's been proven. It is a proven fact that Florida is putting $400 million into a capital campaign for Ben Hill Griffin Stadium. It is a fact that Florida has won multiple national championships. It's a fact it can be done with Steve Spurrier there. I can't argue any of that. Neither can anyone else. It's going to be, does Lane believe he can do it in Oxford? And is Ole Miss going to make him competitive, pay-wise, assistant-wise, staff-wise, NIL-wise? I do believe all of that's going to happen. The question is, what does Lane decide? Had it not been because of his daughter, and we learned this through the ESPN documentary, Lane would probably have went to Auburn.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't say that, but he intimated that somewhat in that documentary. But his daughter pretty honestly said, well, here's why we would like you to say that. And Lane very emotionally said, okay, I will stay. I don't think it will be anything like that. I do think there's a family aspect to this. And real quickly, I'll tell you, Ryan, Lane's son, Knox, I think he's a sophomore or a junior on Oxford High School's football team. I think he's a sophomore. He came in as the Chargers were trailing 14 points at some point during the game, leads them back to victory, and then throws I don't know if it's a 2-point conversion or whatever, but they won the game in overtime. And Lane talked about it at the press conference. He was asked, and I actually posted that on my social channels. And he was very adamant about how important that was that Knox, played, and he loves it at Oxford. So how much does that play into it? I mean, Knox could play at Gainesville High as easily he could play at Oxford. That's not what I'm arguing, but that's a family aspect. And Lane is much more of the family guy than he was 2 years ago, than he was 4 years ago. He's made mention, as he said in the documentary, about how much Oxford is special to him because it's where his parents passed. Oxford embraced he and his family. So I do think he can shake Oxford's hand and give them a hug and then go to Gainesville as easily as he can stay here in Oxford. So I don't know how much of it plays a factor, but I do think in some ways family is going to play a factor in the decision.
Brad, as we wrap up, Penn State is open. There's some thought that Auburn could come open, potentially Florida State could come open. I mean, some big-time jobs. But is Florida the main one that the folks out there are worried about?
As far as Lane Kiffin, yes. Now, I will say this. If you really want to kick the can down the road, it's obvious that people are not happy with Brian Kelly at LSU. I would guess, depending on, LSU hosting Texas A&M, they're a home dog at night. I don't know if that's happened. I don't know how long ago it's been since that's happened, especially if it's not Alabama. How long has it been? So if they happen to lose that one and maybe lose 5-6 games, is it a situation where Brian Kelly calls his agent and say, look, man, I've had enough. Get me that Penn State job. So if Brian Kelly leaves LSU, that's obviously a threat for Lane Kiffin. I think there are certain jobs, LSU, Florida. I don't know about Auburn, but Alabama, if something were to Kalen DeBoer be like, hey, man, I've had enough of this, although I think he's kind of settled in Tuscaloosa, and it's going to do a great job. I think Kalen DeBoer's a great coach. But if something crazy happens there, those are the three main jobs, and maybe at Ohio State or the NFL. I think that's the main jobs that Lane Kiffin would really look at. But you're right. Florida is absolutely up there, and it is absolutely an issue for Ole Miss fans right now for sure.
Brad, 30 seconds. You follow that program as closely as anybody, and we'll certainly have you back on as the days turn into weeks, as the story develops. But as we sit here on October the 21st, is Lane Kiffin the coach of Ole Miss next year?
Right now, at 2:55 as we record Central Time, I think so, yes. I believe the university is going to do what they need to do financially. I think they're going to take care of his staff and the NIL. And I think at the end of the day, Lane Kiffin is able to run his program just like he wants to, with nobody over his back, exactly what he wants to, and a great administration to work for, everybody working in concert. I think he stays at Ole Miss.
Hacker here. Thank you guys so much for watching this video on the 1010XL Gator channel. Be sure and like, subscribe, and keep it locked right here on all the 1010XL YouTube channels on the 1010XL YouTube network.